Hey everybody, and welcome to another live episode of the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast. This is going to be a special one again. Nate, our CEO, is out of town, as you can tell. Chad's back in his normal position by popular
Sorry
demand.
for freaking you guys out.
And then we have another special guest with us today, Dave Christenson from Team Marc Pro Cycling, also a TrainerRoad employee. Good to have you, Dave.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're going to talk stage races. So for all of you that are with us live here on Facebook and YouTube, we're glad you're with us. And this is all about you sending in questions, and then we'll answer those questions. So everything that has to do with stage racing, whether it's prepping for stage races, whether it's recovery, whether it's training for one, whether it's strategy and tactics, so many different things. All the stage race and road race stuff, let us know. Those type of questions are definitely on the table for this episode. But with that, guys, let's kick off the proper podcast, shall we? Cool. Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee with our head coach, Chad Timmerman.
Hey, everybody.
And a special guest, Dave Christenson from Team Marc Pro Cycling. How's it going, man?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Welcome.
And thanks to all the listeners for suffering through me.
It's going to be good. So if any of you have watched The Chase or any video that's ever been put out by TrainerRoad, Dave is our filmmaker, our in-house filmmaker. So The Chase is definitely like our crown jewel right now that we have. And we're working on some other awesome projects too, but that's Dave's handiwork. So he's an incredible cyclist too, though. And many times he's faster than the people that he's filming. So
Usually.
Yeah, usually. So we're stoked to have Dave with us. Dave, can you give us an idea first, I guess, before we get into anything? How'd you get into cycling? And then how'd you get into, because you race overseas and that sort of stuff. So tell us how you got started into that too.
Okay. So I started with mountain biking, family friend. Kind of was like, hey, why don't you give it a try? And I mountain biked for probably 5 years.
Nice.
Nothing like really super serious, but I actually did a lot of the Reno-Willman races when I was younger.
Nice.
Did Downeyville one time.
Heck yeah.
Was freaked out. It's pretty sketchy.
Ruined you for mountain biking.
Yeah, when you're like 17 years old, you're like, oh, man.
They've got a new course for that this year, by the way. So stay tuned, folks.
And then I transitioned over to road cycling, like kind of as a mode of transportation, and then through the mountain bike racing, I was like, oh, okay, I'll try road racing. And I liked it a little more. And then I think living in Italy, like really gave me, I went to study there, and that gave me a passion for cycling. And then working on various projects with like companies like Rafa, stuff like that, got really even more sucked into the cycling sphere.
Nice.
And then after college, I moved to Asia to work, and ended up riding for like it was a pro team, but did a bunch of UCI road races and stage races over there, and a bunch of really hard amateur races too before that over there. That it's a total different scene. You don't really know about a lot of these races. That nobody ever talks about them, but they're China, Thailand, Indonesia, just a bunch of crazy places.
You have a pretty extensive background in road racing.
Yeah,
and stage racing specifically too. You have a lot of experience in that. I mean, because there's road racing, and then stage racing obviously is road racing. But I mean, as I found out this year, even just with mountain biking, it's a different animal. It's a different animal. Stage racing's pretty gnarly stuff. Yeah. So you ride for Team Marc Pro, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You ride on KTMs. They don't have motors,
nope.
as some people might think.
Motorless version.
Sometimes I wish they did.
Yeah, exactly.
You're getting spat out the back.
And then you race. So you guys, even though you're a team based out of Northern California, and if you listen to the previous episode of the podcast, you could hear us break down lots of different stuff about stage racing, team camps, and plenty of stuff. But you're based out of Northern California, the team is, but you race all around the world too, right?
Yeah, it seems lately we've been doing most of our international stuff has been in Central America.
Nice.
And I think I didn't do it, but the team went to China last year too. But
nice.
yeah. Nationally, they race a lot nationally. I don't do the national races with them as much because I'd rather save my vacation days to go do the international stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. That seems more fun.
Yeah.
Kind of. Then I hear about your racing. It doesn't sound very fun. And where we left off on the last podcast is you went to the Dominican Republic. Someone's saying Dave talks too quietly. I guess if you get closer to the mic,
Okay.
then it'll
Sorry.
be better.
Sorry, guys.
But Dave has a softer voice than us loudmouths over here. But we talked about you guys are going to the Dominican Republic for a stage race there. It was a UCI stage race, but then this year, I guess it wasn't UCI?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, they had all the UCI banners and stuff up, but I think that was probably just a holdover from last
from the
year.
previous year.
I think what happened is they lost funding. So
Gotcha.
I think it went from 8 days, which was last year, to 6 days, which was cool, actually. I thought it was better this year.
Yeah.
And we were based in the same hotel, not a lot of transfers.
Yeah.
Which made it a lot easier. So, yeah, they asked for our licenses, but I don't know. I don't think it was, as far as I know, there was no UCI commissaries there. But do you want me to just kind of?
Yeah, so I've heard some gnarly things about the races down there. Like, I heard from one guy that did a race. This is down in Puerto Rico. That they had the KOM and it was a mountaintop finish, and like as soon as they got there, some locals were up in like the front group, and then a bunch of dudes appeared out of the trees with quads, and they just like held onto their quads and like they just knee-bellied their way up to the top, you know. And like I hear it's kind of wild, right? Like, did you guys have any crazy experiences at all this year? Or just dudes that were crazy fast?
It's extremely fast. I mean, it was just as fast as a UCI race. Maybe faster. And like having done it the year before, I knew the local guys were pretty strong. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of the craziest thing. It's sort of like having done it so much, you know the routine. You get in the day before, you build your bikes, you meet up with your other teammates. We all got in at the same time, basically, so it was really easy.
How many of you?
There were 6 of us.
Six teammates. And you just brought road bikes. You didn't bring TT bikes, right?
No, there was no time trial this year, so
that's cool.
That makes it easier. And we all pretty much know the routine. I think I'd raced with Boardman before, but I think that was his first time to race in Central America.
Yeah.
And
he's your climber.
He's like our
GC
hammer.
guy.
I mean, he's a beast. He's like good at everything.
Yeah.
But
how'd you guys end up doing? Did you get stayed like podiums at all or anything else like that? Because it's gnarly riders you're riding against, so the podium's huge.
Nate Freed, who was there, also put it. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So it started out well. First day, like, do you want me to go stage by stage?
Or I guess the highlights, like what
the
you
highlights?
feel. Yeah.
I think I was really impressed with Gavin and Quentin.
Yeah.
Who are 2 younger guys. I'd raced with Gavin. He guest rode with us last year in Puerto Rico, actually.
Yeah.
And he, I think, got 3rd on GC at that race.
Okay.
Wow. But this race is much harder.
Yeah.
The stages are so long. It's like 5 hours a day. It's really long. It's hard. It hot.
Windy.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, the non-climbing days were like 6,000 feet.
Oh, wow.
Would be a flat day.
Wow.
Still climbing.
But like first stage, Quentin and Gavin made the break.
Mm-hmm.
And then Boardman and I were second group, basically just sitting on, not doing any work, getting towed around by Francisco Mancebo.
Nice. Good wheel to grab.
Well, you just sit on them and you're like, I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
Go ahead. But I can't remember the placings that day, but they, took significant time on us. They got like 6 minutes something.
Oh, wow.
Because nobody was chasing, and it was a big break, like 15. I'm pretty sure Quentin got 3rd or 2nd that day.
Jeez, man,
and
that's good. That's a big result.
Yeah, Gavin was like, 6th or something like that. And
did Quentin end up winning a stage?
The highest Quentin got was 2nd.
Oh,
and he held the sprinter's jersey, or the sprinter's jersey. They had 2 sprinter's jerseys. One was like the most, I think they call it regularidad.
Okay.
So it'd be like who's the highest placings overall.
Makes sense.
So I guess to put it in perspective, it's a 6-stage race, and Quentin was only out of the top 10 on the climbing day.
Wow.
So he finished in the top 10 every single day but one.
Wow.
Which
That's
is
good,
insane.
Man. That's
like,
really, really good.
Insane.
You said pretty high average speeds too over the course of these long stages.
Yeah, I don't really. So Blake did this breakdown, which was pretty cool. Blake Anton, who I've raced with a lot overseas, he's a super fun guy to do these trips with because it's great attitude, and he's just a cool guy, fun to ride with, and he did this breakdown of because he's done this race 3 years in a row, and this year was like a mile and a half faster than any other year he'd done it.
Really?
So how fast, like roughly, were you guys carrying on
think
averages?
The average for the whole race was 26.5 miles an hour or something.
Holy
like
with all that climbing.
with everything. Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
That's crazy fast, man.
I could be overstating a little bit, but I think that's about what it was.
Wow.
And it was 700 miles.
That's in 6 days.
In 6 days.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Yeah, Chad, we're not doing that anytime soon. No.
No.
Not at all. Well, thanks. This is going to be cool. We're going to, like I said, for all that are joining us live, we're going to cover the stage racing questions that you're sending in. We have a number of them coming in already, but keep putting them in so then we can answer those. One of them that I see right here is somebody says, how do I recover between stages on the same day? In my case, a TT, then a crit. So that kind of sounds like Chico's stage race. I know you've done that too, Chad, so perhaps you guys can.
Yeah, a lot of stage races have 2-a-days when they're just like 3 and 4 stage races.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a TT and a crit.
Fit it in on a
that's pretty common
weekend
combination.
type of a deal. So how do you guys do that? Like, let's say you start with a TT. What do you do to recover before the crit?
I think it depends on how much time is between the two, but it's usually like Chico. I think it's pretty significant. It's like a few hours, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I definitely after the TT do a really good cool down, like spin for, at least 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, easy.
Same here.
Especially being older.
Yeah.
How old are you, Chad? Dave?
Let's see. I'm slightly older than Valverde.
Okay.
But younger than Chad.
Nice. Okay. Gotcha. You can figure that out.
I just turned 40. So
awesome.
I'm old.
And then you, just like a breakdown really quick. I should have said this first because I think this is one of the first requested things, but your height, your weight, and FTP.
So this is crazy. At camp, they measured our height at our team camp. And I thought I was 5'9". Turns out I'm 5'8".
You were 5'9".
Yeah. Like he had this
10 years ago.
laser thing to measure it. And he's like, yeah, most people think they're an inch taller than they really are. And I was like, so I'm 5'8".
Huh. All right, cool.
So 40 years or whenever I got to 5'9".
Yeah.
I've been thinking. But so, and I'm probably like 145 or 143 right now.
Okay.
Probably 325 FTP.
Okay, cool. So that sets the groundwork, I guess. So getting back to how you recover, you do that cool down after that TT. Then what's next on the list if you have a couple hours? What do you do?
I would probably, depending on how long the time trial was, I definitely would take like a H24 recovery drink after. Like we have an endurance one and a protein one. More, I think one's, they call one endurance and one for more like gym, like if you're going to the gym.
Nice. Strength one.
Yeah, strength. That's what it's called.
Yeah. Rebuild.
And I'd probably take the endurance one.
Okay.
Take that down. And then depending on when that next stage was, that's how I'd time if I was going to eat, right? Like if I was going to eat something substantial.
Yeah, if it's like a 5-hour gap, you can get away with quite a lot. With the 2-hour gap, not so much.
Yeah, it's kind of tough. Like, what would you take down if you had just like a 2-hour gap?
I would probably just eat some oatmeal or something
something quick burning.
Yeah.
Didn't sit on the stomach very long. Wasn't certainly not fatty or super high protein. Not a lot of fiber. That sort of thing. The usual recommendations we make when you have a narrow window to nourish yourself.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like. So Chico is a good example, right? That's a 20-minute time trial if you're fast, right? Mm-hmm. That's taxing, but it's not crazy. You're not burning a ton of glycogen, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you got an hour and a half crit after that. You don't need to eat a ton.
And then conditions would dictate just how severely, if any dehydration or real substantial dehydration took place. Obviously, hydration will be a concern, but less so in, less severe conditions.
Yeah, even if you didn't drink during the time trial, which is a common choice on shorter time trials
over
like
20
this,
minutes.
right?
No.
You don't need to drink.
Yeah.
So in
don't
that,
even put a bottle on your bike for that.
Yeah, you're gonna save time. Yeah. And you may have a dry mouth, but it's that effort. As long as you're hydrating afterward, it's not going to be detrimental. I would say.
Come into a hydrated post. You're
like
fine.
Full gas. What would that be? Even like 300 calories or something? I don't know.
Yeah. You're probably not going to burn a whole lot.
Maybe 400. Sure.
So then, I guess, is there anything that you guys, or have you ever screwed that up, going from the TT to the crit, and like, have you figured out what made you screw that up? Like, for example, you feel like you just didn't come into the crit prepared for one reason or another.
It can be a little vexing if you're targeting one over the other. I mean, I like to finish with a time trial and just leave everything I had left in that time trial. But commonly, and it seems to work out this way with Chico, the crit is always the last event. So you almost kind of restrain yourself a bit maybe in the time trial, knowing that you still have a criterium to race, especially if you plan to do well in that criterium.
Right.
20-minute effort, you probably don't restrain yourself too much, knowing that you can only suffer so much and leave so much out there over the course of a 20-minute effort. But it does force you to prioritize a bit and maybe restrain yourself on that earlier event.
Yeah, because that's interesting. I know that, like, Dave, like we were talking about a general strategy. If you have like a stage race and it's got a TT, and then you've got the other road race things, and in many cases the TT is where you can grab the most time on people.
Well, and see, that sways what I just said, or shapes what I just said, for sure.
Yeah, Chico. I mean, if we're using that as an example, you could do nothing in any other stage. Like, okay, good example, right? 2016, we rode it in the Masters field, Chad and I, and a couple of teammates, and I finished like 40th, and I crashed in the road race, but got same time.
Pretty hefty crash, too.
Yeah, it was within the last 3K, so I got same time. Yeah, and then I did a good TT, and I got 6th overall.
Yeah.
That race is like, I mean, if you don't lose time, your placings don't matter, but if you can smoke the TT, then you're going to finish high on GC.
That's pretty much it. Worked that way across the board. I know other categories, the guys who time trialed the best were the guys who were in the top 10 GC and the winners.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm sure, I mean, if you do hammer the TT, let's say, and you're really going for time on that, how do you then adjust for that when you have a crit coming up just a few hours later? Like, does your strategy change for the crit?
Probably in the case of a GC rider who knows that time trial is going to shape his final standing.
Yeah.
I don't know that you certainly wouldn't hold back over the course of the time trial, and you'd probably just plan on surviving the crit, just staying tucked away.
How do you survive, I guess? Like what are the things that you do, Dave, like to limit losses in a crit?
So I know that I'm pretty much strong enough to like sit in. Like, I'm not really much of a crit rider. I don't like them.
You're good at them.
Yeah, I'm okay. But honestly, like in one like Chico, I don't really try to play a role unless my teammate wants me to help them win. I don't really like bumping elbows and fighting for those really fast, like what Pete does, right? I'm not a big guy, and that kind of freaks me out. I'm not really into sprinting. Right?
Perhaps you're wiser.
Right? Yeah. I think with age
changes things.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, you definitely like the last stage of the Dominican. It was like a hot dog circuit, right?
Yeah.
So pretty much a crit. And I rode, I think it was a 10-kilometer hot dog loop.
Okay.
And I rode the break for 6 laps with a few other guys, and we got caught with 4 laps to go.
Yeah.
And I'm like, right. I'm just rolling in on the back, and it was seriously like that scene in Return of the Jedi when the speeder bikes are like bouncing off trees.
Yeah.
I saw like 4 dudes hit trees, and I'm like,
oh my gosh.
So it's like, but like Quentin was right up there. I think Quentin got 4th that day.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you're comfortable with that, and I think he had to like jump over like a median and thread through some trees and then back over again. He's, there's guys that can do it and are comfortable doing it, but I'm not. So I think crit is just survival. You can tail gun it pretty easy and just finish, right? Like you can save energy tail gunning too. You can, when everybody's doing that accordion effect bunching up into the corner, you can kind of just when you go into the corner, you leave a little bit of a gap and you kind of just roll in once people start pedaling.
And with criteriums, it's not super common in those upper end races that a break gets away, stays away. So it's usually kind of a mass finish. So if you're within the peloton in that big group, you're going to get same time anyway. So in the case of GC, you're not going to hemorrhage any time over something like that.
Especially those in the P1-2 races, the crits are like the early break is never probably going to stick.
Right.
The ones that stick are like those last few laps that either
and
it's
they
the
put
right
a few
mix.
seconds on the field.
Yeah.
10 seconds, right?
It's when everybody else is really, really fully depleted. It's actually good we're on crits. Dan sent in this question from YouTube. He says, what advice or tactics do you have for a time trial style rider to do well in crits? I have an FTP of 340 watts, but poor anaerobic capabilities and tend to struggle in crits. So I guess that's not unlike, well, you have like an ability to just throttle up and throttle up and throttle up, but you do a lot of time trial style training too, like sustained work, right?
Yeah, I prefer to do that kind of training because high threshold, everything else feels easy.
That's true.
A small CDA. So if you're a smaller rider, and for what it's worth, if anybody did the math when we were talking his weight and his FTP, Dave's pushing 5 watts kilogram. He's at 4.9 with that particular combination. So he's right up there with some very, very fast company.
Yeah. Let's use our local crit as an example. It's an oval. It's really windy.
Pan flat.
And this is the crit that we're all going to beat Pete in.
Actually,
since we're talking about Pete, he brought donuts in, and I brought kale chips.
That's disgusting. Look at that. People eat this stuff.
Actually, if you're doing it right, you don't eat. But if this is just to remind you, if you were to eat, this is what you should eat.
Not donuts. Contrasting there with the that's good.
But so I was talking to Pete about this yesterday. Basically, the way this crit works is if Pete and I are good enough to like pretty much follow everything that goes. Yeah. But we both know that the last 20 minutes is where you go. That's when you really go. Yeah. Because we know we can do, for 20 minutes at the end of an hour-long crit, I can ride at threshold or higher. Yes. So that's when you like try to snap the field and get away.
And coming from a rider that's like got the opposite profile of this fella, like I'm very much more so like a hammer on, hammer off type of a guy, right? I fear that, right? I fear a rider that has this time trial style capability, and if they can be smart and hang in the beginning and then make a move really stick when it counts, like toward the latter end of the race especially, then that's really hard for a rider like me to be able to chase down because I won't be able to hold that enough power to bridge up to them. And then once I catch them, they're holding such a steady rate that I won't be able to recover. Yeah. So that does make it really hard.
Yeah, and then, I mean, obviously you're going to employ the fact that you can maintain a high level of steady power. So you're going to use that to your benefit and not wait for you're not going to be like the responsive rider. You're going to be probably someone who follows something and then tries to attack whatever that small group is, maybe just solos it, goes with a smaller attack early on. Yeah. And when you go can be largely dictated by the strength of the field. So I've seen guys who have big time trial prowess and they time trial off the front in the early stages of the race and maybe put a lap on the field. But when you get into the more highly competitive categories, that's a super hard thing to do. The early breaks, they have to be strongly built with a bunch of riders working well together if they stand a chance. Yeah. So if you're a Cat 5 racer, you might be able to time trial off the front and win the race, get your upgrade, do whatever you're looking to do. But as like I said, you move up into Cat 2, Cat 1, you're going to have to time that move and employ that time trial power with a lot more strategy.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's also like knowing who you're racing against, too, because if somebody is up the road and they're strong, you might want to like not give them much of a leash, but like see if you can get away from the field and just get up there with that guy and work together. Yeah,
watch that guy establish, or that rider, that girl, whatever, establish enough of a gap that not too many people are going to be able to come with you should you try to jump across. Wait for that right time when that rider's not too far away, but not so close that everyone comes with you, not so far away that it makes it so hard for you to get there. Yeah. So again, greater strategy folds into it.
It's pretty tricky too, like for if you get into a situation where you go up the road and somebody bridges up to you and you're a steady state athlete or more steady, remember when that person bridged up to you and perhaps that this person, let's just assume they aren't that steady state athlete, but they were able to bridge up to you, they're really, really going to need rest. And something
It's
that's interesting is if you are that steady state athlete, you can just keep your poles consistent. You don't have to blow them out of the water. But when you keep them consistent, and then when they drop back in and they need to recover, and you're still consistent, and you're like just keeping that consistent level, that's what kills those hammery, punchy riders. They really need those moments where it's zero pedaling for a bit, and then they can keep going. So you can really, like, I know that crits are surgy, and they are, but in many times the winning move isn't as surgy as we think. Like the winning move tends to be more steady.
I think also a good thing to think about too is even if that's the type of rider you are, if you can cause a split in a crit at the end, like with 8 guys, you've just increased your chances too.
Yeah.
By a ton. And I'm definitely a guy who doesn't, like, for my weight, my sprint is pretty bad. Like, I think I top out at, like, 850 watts, 900 watts. I don't have a huge sprint.
At the end of a lot of work, though.
Yeah.
So not necessarily fresh.
That, like, if you've got that TT power, like that 1K, like that kilo kind of like, you know, you can use that to go early. Like if you're in a group,
totally,
and you can just catch them sleep, you know, catch everybody sleeping, and then I've won races that way, like road races and crits, where you go with 2K to go, 500 meters to go, like just catch the sprinters out. That's where that TT power plays into a good role, you know.
That's not what the sprinters want.
Yeah.
Like, and if you're carrying, like, I know a lot of people might think, oh, well, they'll just latch onto your wheel, and they might try to, but you'd be surprised at how decreased their ability to sprint is if your pace going in for that final kilometer is really high. Like
take a lot of the wind out of their sails that way.
Or
it
you
really does.
Also, I mean, I guess this could be a race spoiler, but you have had time to watch Tours de Vlaanderen.
Hopefully, yep.
Yves Lampert
If
won.
not,
watch what he
cover
does.
your ears.
He didn't really. Nobody wanted to chase him.
He
They're
just
got
out front, put a little power in, looked back. Nobody was responding, and he reacted accordingly.
Game over.
Yeah.
I mean,
we've actually, I feel like we've seen that a lot this classic season, like solo or like 2-guy moves where they just pull from a long way out.
Racing, waiting for someone else to do something so you can mark it and respond to it, but not initiating the action.
All those guys screwed up because they were watching Boston Hagen because he was the best sprinter there, and they wanted him to peg it back, and he's like, nope,
that's not what I do.
And this is just a matter of knowing your competition. So the more you race, the more you stay in a particular category or a particular region, and you learn who the hitters are, the people you need to concern yourself with, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. Because I mean, you can get a guy who's got a big engine, but maybe he doesn't corner well. So on a technical course, he's probably not the right guy to be in a break with. But in a straight course like Dave's talking about, a basic course, is just the sort of guy you want to be with. So as you develop these relationships and understandings of each rider's capabilities, it benefits yourself greatly.
Yeah, I think steady state athletes are very, very apt for success in criteriums in a lot of cases.
Sure.
Yeah,
if they ride it right.
That's what that guy has.
Yeah, that's a big threshold.
That's a lot. I mean, even if you're a heavier guy in the flats, that's a lot.
That's what Pete's banking on doing. And that's probably what he's going to do a lot of the time too. Is just put the hurt on us until people just come unhinged and we start falling off. And
I think you're our best bet to beat Pete. No pressure, Dave.
I did beat him yesterday.
Hey, attaboy. Nice.
You rode away from him in the sprint.
We actually, we had a good outdoor ride yesterday because it went from like 43 degrees on Monday to like 70 degrees yesterday here in Reno.
So our lunch rides are back. Our Wednesday lunch rides.
So nice.
And for the people betting on the time trial,
it's a good
Chad's hammering right now. So I think I'm in Chad camp right now.
Team Chad?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I've realigned my goals. So I still want the sub 50, but to make it just a little more interesting, my goal is now to beat Dave.
Nice.
Because I think Dave is going to go under 50. So if I beat Dave, then I too will go under 50. It's just makes it a little more interesting. Whether or not I actually feel I can do it is kind of beside
Nate's
the point.
not even in the picture. He's like, no, just gotcha. Yeah, just leave it there.
Nate's got the same chance he's always had, just not much.
I haven't ridden with Nate in a while since last year, so it would be good to go ride with him and just see.
Yeah, and just see. For those of you that are on Team Jonathan, jump ship. Just jump ship. It's not going well.
Abandon.
Like you're like a Cincinnati Bengals fan right now. Just
obviously
jump ship.
his confidence is super high.
Yeah, it's not good. Not good. So let's get into some more stage racing questions. This one is from Fisao from YouTube. He says, do you take time to stretch after stages and multi-day events? I guess we can probably stretch, or no pun intended there, but I guess extend that into not just being stretching, but like, do you roll or how do you recover, physically recover?
So during a multi-day race, that's huge. Like, I guess, like obviously right off the bike, H24 endurance rebuild, right? Mm-hmm. First thing. And then actually at our team camp, one of our sponsors, Mill Valley Endurance, he gave this really cool talk about sodium intake. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And actually before he gave me, I'm going to have to get the name of them. I think they're called H2O Pro. Okay. And you can get these tablets in like 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 1,500 milligrams, and like 250 and 500. And basically what he told me is you take those big ones after the stages, because really
super sodium depleted.
Yeah, if you're depleted, you need to replenish that sodium just as much as the water, because if you don't, you're not retaining that water, and it's not,
it passes right through. Yeah.
So I used that, and that I think that really did help me. Like I was sipping on like the 250s before, the night before. So 250 milligrams in like 20, I think a 24 ounce.
Like a normal bottle?
Yeah, like a 20 ounce.
20 ounce, yeah.
And
I think.
And then after the stages, I would take down those 1,500 milligrams.
Huh.
And I think that just sets you up for the next day.
Yeah.
Right?
So basically you're very seriously addressing your hydration, rehydration.
Yeah.
What do you physically do in addition to like what you take in for nutrition?
Yeah. So stretching, definitely. Marc Pro for like at least an hour.
Yeah. And those are like the Marc Pro is actually the electronic stimulation on your muscles. It's like it's effectively like they're going for like passive recovery because you aren't flexing your muscles, but the idea is it flushes things, I believe.
Yeah, so. It increases blood flow, which is going to promote recovery
and lymph removal.
Yeah. That's
that, and then stretching's huge, especially afterwards. I don't really do much before, but afterwards for sure. Because road racing, you start out pretty, long days are not hard off the gun. You usually have like a neutral rollout or some, you don't need to be like super, super limber, like not for like a cyclocross race or a crit where it starts, bang off the gun.
What do you like? I assume back, shoulders, neck type of stuff is pretty sore.
So I'll bring like those stick things. Yeah. Bring that because it's easy to fit in a suitcase. Like a foam roller, like the hollow one, they're cool because that's big, but you can put stuff inside of it too. So it's actually doesn't take that much room.
That's a good tip.
Yeah. Trying to think of what some of the
other
do you guys.
No, I know at the team camp they had a massage therapist. Does a massage therapist ever travel with any portion of the team?
I think she would come to the bigger races sometimes, but
she'd not come to the Dominican Republic.
No. But actually, I did get. How many massages did I get there? Just one.
The race had a massage. Yeah. They had that at Single Track 6 too. That was very nice.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I think
that was very nice to have.
Dominican the accommodations were quite less swanky than that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure they were. Another question here, somewhat unrelated, but from Pete, he says, compared to, and this isn't Pete, this is a different Peter, I should say. Yeah, he says, compared to Cliff Bar, how much time do you spend training on the road versus on a trainer, considering you compete in stage races and not just single-day criteriums?
So I guess it would probably vary.
Yeah.
Well, first off, what's a common training load per week in hours? How many hours?
I shoot for like 15. I'm good.
Yeah.
Like 20 and up is a big week, but I do those occasionally.
Yeah.
It's obviously in a stage race. I think Dominican was like 23 hours.
And a high-level stage race at that.
Yeah. It was like, 23 hours and 1,600 TSS or something for 6 days.
Jeez. Yeah. So that's contrasting to like 8 to 12 is I think what Pete was saying, depending. Usually that's where they're at. Sometimes more. Sometimes
for hour and a half races, sure.
Yeah.
Like personally, I do 3 to 4 trainer workouts a week. I do all my quality, like really focused intervals. Like it's really beneficial for me because I'm training for this TT too, because I don't want to lose.
Yeah, I'm on Team Dave. so
for that steady state stuff, it's just It's so much easier on the trainer because
you just can't replicate it.
You don't have any traffic. There's no stoplights.
Yeah.
And then
don't have wind.
Yeah.
Like, when you're in position and get blown by wind.
Yeah. I really like it to replicate a long climb too, where there is accelerations. I think I did Dragon the other day, and I never had seen that one in our library, but that one felt a lot like racing up a climb. I can't remember the length of the intervals, but it had pretty big sprint spikes.
I think it's a steady state effort, so like 90% probably around sweet spot, and then you surge to 120 to 150 for a few seconds at a time.
And that really, like, I did that one, and I'm like, that's a good one to train for doing, a 40-minute climb where there's going to be people
attacking.
20-minute climb where there's attacks, but
bit of animation.
But then you are going to settle back down because people aren't going to ride at 600 watts for very long.
So 3 to 4 workouts a week is probably more than what most people would perhaps assume.
Yeah.
But then and of course we agree with that, like logically, considering that we're TrainerRoad, but you also, like, on the weekends a lot of the time you'll get out. So like we have like a local hammer fest on Saturdays called the Drop Ride. And you're a staple there at the Drop Ride. So you try to complement that, right? Like you have your uninterrupted structure that can be like very, I should say, like direct and intentional. And then after that on the weekends, I noticed, that's when you put in some more time and volume and make it more variable, right?
Yeah. So, I like riding the trainer, and I like riding outside. They both help me meet my goals, right? So the Saturday ride, depending on who's there, it can be really hard. It's always tough, but if there's a lot of good guys, like if the local hitters come out, it's usually pretty hard.
For about what, 2.5 hours? Usually 2 hours.
It's like 2 hours. I think the actual course. I think Rossi's got the KOM, obviously, but it's like 135.
Wow, that's fast.
Hour 35.
That's a fast day.
And I think, so.
I was not there that day.
It can depend on if it's windy, it's going to be slow, right?
Yeah, and then sometimes, it's basically laps in one area and then ride over and do laps in another area. So increasing those laps obviously increases the duration of the ride, but regardless how short or how long it is, it's intense the whole time.
I consider that like my VO2 workout. If I'm not racing on Saturday, that's like my VO2 workout.
So it's basically a race substitution or race simulation even. Yeah.
This is a question from Sean from YouTube again. He says, assuming no radios in P1, so that's Pro, Cat 1, how do you guys communicate in the race? Does the team stay together the whole race, or do you find each other at critical points like important climbs or the finale? So how do you guys set that up? Like, is it just game plan beforehand and then execute it as best as you can, or how do you communicate during?
Yeah, so I think you go in with plan A, but that's usually shot from like the gun. Because things change so fast in a road race, and you can think about it, but so you kind of have a plan B, but really what it is just making sure that you know where your teammates are and that you know the race situation. I'm pretty small on the bike, so sometimes I don't see when a break goes because I literally can't see over, like if I'm riding behind Chad, I can't see.
Yeah, he's swole. He's big.
And there's been a lot of times where I'll like roll up to Blake and I'll be like, because Blake's tall, I'll be like, who's up there? He's like, none of us. So one of us should probably go. Right? It's kind of like I do. That's one of those things where, and Blake's our road captain too, so he's probably a little more in tune to that stuff.
Savvy,
yeah.
Well, I remember when I went to it was Chico and another race. It doesn't matter which one. And Phil, I hung out with Phil, so we did our Masters race, and then I hung out with Phil during the P1-2s, or I was close by, and I saw how he coached the riders on the fly. Every lap they'd roll by on the circuit course at the raceway, the motor raceway, and he kept yelling, "Stay as a group, ride as a group, ride as a team. You guys are too dispersed, you're too spread out. Get back together." So obviously there's something behind that. Phil really drilled that every time they came by, that they weren't lumped together. Yeah. So is that to facilitate communication or just to show strength in numbers? What's that about?
Because I think like strength in numbers and riding, it's a fight for position, right? But if you're around your teammates, they're going to let you slot in.
Sure.
It's also to maybe potentially set up a move, because if you're at the front and somebody from your team goes, then you can just soft pedal and kind of give them a little more advantage. I'll give you an example from the Dominican. There was only one real climbing day that had like big, had like a 40-minute climb, right?
Right.
2 KOMs. And it was sort of it was just one of those stages where they took you out and just got miles in your legs before you hit the climbs.
Gotcha.
So it was like flat, rolly, out to a turnaround, and then you flipped, and then, straight back to where you just came kind of thing, and then turned off there, and then you hit this climb, right? And we all, that we know beforehand that that's coming. In this race especially, this is another thing that helps a lot. We have this guy, Gustavo Carrillo, and he lives in Guatemala, but he's grew up in Chicago, and he's the guy that we hire as our DS. And
cool.
Nice. Fluent in Spanish. He is so critical, for stuff like this, because you don't, these races, you don't often get a race book. You don't know what the stage is going to be, but he'll go around to the locals and ask, what's this like? What's this like?
And when you say DS, that's director, the team director.
He drives the car, gives us food, tells us the race situation.
That's helpful.
If you get a flatty, you go back and get it.
Yeah.
And so he was clutch and basically, and also Nate Freed, he's good at going through and mapping stuff out. He can just go on, map my ride or whatever and plot if he knows the cities we're going to go through. So all this beforehand. And that one climbing day, we knew we had to be it was a full sprint train lead out
up
into
to the climb.
Into the base of that climb.
Base, yeah.
And I think I just kind of, shot my wad in the lead out basically to keep Boardman and Gavin up there, because they were on some pretty good form. So the rest of us just kept them sheltered and just rode the front. And it was probably 65 kilometers an hour into the base of a 40-minute climb.
Wow.
Just fighting for that first, so you're in that upper third, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these all typically hilltop finishes, or did you descend after?
That had a descent afterwards.
Okay.
Of crazy descent.
Yeah, I can imagine that changes things a bit.
Yeah. So it was it's not like a crit though. I don't mind, like I said before, I don't like to bump and, throw elbows and crits, but that's a little safer.
Yeah.
Especially when you're up there with your team, because then you get respect too. People are like, these guys they know what they're doing. They're doing this right. And, it was seriously a 3-team, lead out.
Wow.
Our team, the GC, the guy with the yellow jersey, and then there was their pro team, I think, Inteja.
Okay.
Is the team that Mancebo was on.
Gotcha.
It was our 3 teams leading it out into the climb. And
so that teamwork's critical.
Yeah, and picking the same races. Picking the same races every year probably has some benefit too, because you come back to a race that you've established yourselves as a team that actually brings it, is willing to do works well, knows what they're doing.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, and this is going to be a bit of a diversion from what we were talking about, but we talk about with training, a lot of people, if you just have a year goal, and it's good to have benchmarks along the way, but it behooves you in most cases to be looking further down the road than just a year, and have a spot where you want to be in a few years with your training and racing. And that's a really good point that I hadn't thought about with that, is use that first year at whatever event you're doing to figure the thing out, and then I'm going to have 2 more years of this thing. Maybe you plan for 3 years of doing this one, and I can really use those races to experiment, to figure things out.
And that's the role of the team manager. So that doesn't necessarily fall on your guys' shoulders so much as the guy who's run the entire team, the director.
Yeah, I think at our level, we're a domestic elite team, but I think every race we go to, we want to win it, but somebody in the team's going to try to win it, right? It's not, we're not feeling it like that. But if you're an amateur, I definitely think that's a good way to go about it. Maybe you go do a stage race and you're there to feel it out, but go on the break and take chances.
Why not? Yeah.
That's a way to and then maybe the next year you go okay, now I know what this race is like. I'm going to try to ride for GC, and you're a little more conservative. So yeah, it's a good way to, feel it out and figure it out.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We have another question here, and this is somewhat similar to what we were talking about with the crits, but I'm headed out. This one's from Madden on Facebook. He says, I'm headed out for my first P1T race this weekend. I have realistic expectations and just want to finish with the pack. Any tactics that you can recommend that will help me conserve energy in a race where I'm vastly outgunned? So this is like maybe if you showed up to like if you guys have done a really gnarly race that's like way above like where you felt you were at, or early season racing I can think of when you're just not quite on form.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you guys do road racing wise to make sure that you conserve energy and ride efficiently?
Well, I think we talked about this with Pete, where you have to have the ability to kind of hide in the field and move around in the field.
Mm-hmm.
So once you immerse yourself in there, you don't necessarily have a free ride. It's still going to be plenty of work, but you're not stuck at the front. You're not dangling off the side or off the back.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I think that's something that's getting comfortable within the group. I think is something that's totally key, because you have to be efficient, like you said.
Yeah, and if you haven't gotten to that point when you move up into the P1-2 ranks, you're sorely off track, because it gets tighter, it gets faster, and people are more comfortable bumping into you, and it's got to be something you're familiar with.
Yeah,
I think just be comfortable with that cycling effect of like where you're in that upper third or that front 15 guys, but then you're going to get overtaken, and then you're going to have to like move back up. It's like the washing machine effect where it's just rolling over, and that happens all the time.
And it never has to be a mad scramble either. It's not, oh no, I'm in the back 2/3 of the field, I've got to get back up to the front. You worked back there gradually, you work up there gradually. Sometimes it takes place quickly, but either way, it's a fluid endeavor. You're not just wasting a bunch of energy trying to maintain that forward position in a field that's got 80 miles of racing left to do.
Yeah, it's like move up. I always tell myself to move up, but I move up when it's slowing down, or pay attention to the wind. Like if it's a crosswind, get on the other side of the peloton on the sheltered side and move up. It's a lot easier on that side. I kind of ride to one side of the peloton or the other. I don't like getting boxed in. You do waste a little more energy, but you always have an out, right? Like you always,
there's something to be said.
Or like that's a way to stay safe too. Like I don't want to crash. Like
true.
Got to work on Monday.
Yeah.
So that's another way to protect yourself. But it's also another way to be able to move up, because if you're in the field, you're getting a better draft, but
if a move goes,
happens,
you're done.
Or echelons start to form and you're stuck.
One thing I would say too is just go in and understand, like you said, you have realistic expectations, Madden, in this situation. But the one thing that I always recognize is that if you can just be as smooth as possible in terms of your power delivery, not being as surgy as possible, try to smooth things out, it's going to pay dividends at the end.
Well, and I like that he's clear on his purpose. He knows what he's there for. He's not going to figure it out on the fly. He's going into it with a specific goal. I just want to survive this, gain some experience, and come out of it alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good way to do your first P1-2 is just to try to finish with the field. Yeah, because it's a step up. It's a tough.
Oh yeah,
I think going up the categories, 5 to 4 is not that much of a difference. 4 to 3 here in NorCal is a pretty big jump. Big jump. Yep. And then 3 to 2 is a huge jump.
Yeah.
And then 2 to 1 is like pretty much the same.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you're racing P1-2, you're in there with those same guys anyways.
So it's a big jump up. Yeah.
Question from David from Facebook. He says, question about breakaways. Do the teams that try to get into the break depend on the type of stage? For example, it would make sense to me for sprint teams to try to send someone up on a sprint stage so they are less pressured to work at the front of the peloton and are thus fresher for the end sprint. Does this make sense? So yeah, I get what you're saying there, David. Like basically, if you have a sprint stage, is it kind of like do you just expect a sprint team to put a guy in a breakaway move early on? Or conversely, if you have a climbing stage, do you just expect a team that has a really good climber to throw somebody in the breakaway? Is that a strategy you guys have? Or
I think the strategy is to always have somebody in the breakaway. Like Bariani Road Race this year, our sprinter was in the breakaway.
And is that a climby race?
No, it's rolly.
Yeah.
It's pretty
windy.
flat and windy, but yeah, our field sprinter was in the break.
Did you intentionally put him in the break, or did you just wind up in it? Yeah.
Okay. I guess Willie's up the road.
there he goes.
Yeah. But then our teammate, Gavin, won that race, and I wouldn't say he's like a pure sprinter, but he's got a good kick, and he's about my size.
Is part of the reason why he won the race because you had your sprinter up the road, so you guys got to turn it off. You didn't have to chase that. So having someone up the road is not just a viable strategy, but a recommended one in a lot of those cases, because you're kind of off the hook. You get to sit in and cover.
Yeah.
And Gavin bridged up with another group of guys.
Or do that, yeah.
And I saw Gavin go. There was a point where I was like, oh, he's got a little gap. And I basically I was at, like I said earlier, like I was at the front. He got a little gap, and there was a couple other guys with him, and I just stopped pedaling.
Yeah.
And it was seriously like just one of those moments where it could have come back, but just that little hesitation, and maybe because whoever was behind me
might have had one of the guys in that.
And then that was the race.
Chase.
That was when Gavin set the foundation of winning that race.
That was the deciding moment.
Yeah.
Weren't you able to even like call a pee break on that one?
Yeah. We let it go out, and then I actually rolled up to the front, and I was like, "Who wants this? You guys want to stop?"
So that's got to be a sure sign of the fact that they were not intending to bring that back.
Everybody else is just like,
checked
cool.
out.
Yeah.
Just riding to the finish line.
Yeah, exactly. That's clever. So Ellis, in this one, we've kind of answered this one to a certain extent, but this is from Facebook as well. He says, if you know you're the strongest for a certain finish, say a short climb, how do you race the race? Do you surf the wheels in the finish and to be the freshest at the end? Or do you surf the wheels in the beginning to try to be the freshest in the end? Or do you make it hard and drop everyone just using brute strength? So what type of stage finishes do you feel like favor you most, Dave? And we can use that scenario with this.
So I feel like I'm not like I'm a good climber, where like Brandon Need here is an exceptional climber who works here. I mean, he's just did a 30-44 up Geiger.
Which we used to be Greg LeMond's like litmus test for whenever he would go into Grand Tours and stuff like that. He would always try. Was he shooting for like
I think it's just a sub 30.
A sub 30 was his goal.
Yeah.
And Brandon's right there at 30-28 or something like that. It's nuts. So very fast.
So I could say that I can climb okay. So hillier stuff tends to suit me.
Yeah.
But if they're huge climbs, like 40-minute climbs, I'm not going to be there.
Okay.
Like my limit's probably like around 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But even like that being said, like Blake Anton, he can do one climb hard, right? He'll tell you that.
He's a big guy. Yeah.
He can get, like if there's one climb, Blake can get over it. But I think that if there's several climbs, or it's like rolly, like more of a rouleur kind of course, that's when it's hard all day long. That's where where it's like really tough all day. That's when I tend to do better.
So in that
case, if it's a longer race too, like the more hours that go by, the better I am.
So how do you, let's say that you are targeting a race like you have a race like that, you're racing it, and you feel like you have a good chance at winning it on a rolly stage like that that's a little longer. What are the things that you're going to want to make sure you're doing earlier on in the race to give yourself a good chance at winning?
I tend to try to ride up near the front.
Yeah.
Not on the front, obviously, but like in that first third.
Yeah.
Depending on how big the field is. If it's a 35-man field, that's not a big field. So you're
pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But if it's 150 guys,
then
you want to be in that front 30.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I try to stay up there as best I can. And it's like the way I look at that too is it's better to burn a match to pad your position and like not burn a match, but burn a little energy to stay in a good position throughout the race rather than being at the back and getting caught out.
And missing the move entirely.
Missing the move or not being
field split.
Yeah, or not being in that fight for the main climb or whatever.
And oftentimes in the back, you end up, especially if it's if it's a rolly course like this too, that yo-yo effect starts to be introduced even then many times when you go through those rolly stuff. So then you end up burning even more matches just trying to hang on.
I think it's just tricky. Like knowing when those key moments come too. That's key, right? Like if you know that climb is at 60 miles in, then you need to be.
A question of knowing the course features.
You need to be at the front when you get to that climb.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that something that people misunderstand too is if you are in contention for the stage win, I see a lot of people just like, it's very clear that this person thinks they can win and wants to win today. And you see it by just an over-anxiousness in how they race. Like they're so eager to chase down every break. And if you don't know your competition, you don't know the course, it can be tricky to understand what really matters. But if you do know the competition and you do know the course, I always find that like you two are really good examples of keeping a cool head and kind of making it, not being
Sometimes.
that nervous person.
Yeah.
But-
Most of the time.
But not being the nervous rider that's like, you can tell like there are riders and you're like, okay, he wants to win because every single move that dude is head up and like eager and you can see him wanting to go and then he wants everybody else to pull him for that.
Yeah, those are the guys that I can't take very seriously, though. I mean, I think those are the guys that you learn are just that. They're anxious and they're eager. They're not necessarily capable. So you know, if you're in it to win it, you know who the guys you need to worry about are. And there's always surprises, guys who are, maybe up and comers and haven't really displayed just how strong they are, but at least 4 or 5, a handful of the guys you need to worry about. Yeah. And those are the guys you mark. Those are the guys you watch. Those are the guys you're concerned with when they do roll away. And, you decide, nope, that's absolutely something I need to be part of or find a way to get to. But often enough, those are the guys who are calm and collected and they're positioned well, but they're not responding to everything that's flying off the front because they simply can't. And they've raced long enough to know that they can't.
So, I mean, did he commented, do you like try to ride them off your wheel or something like that?
Yeah. That was one of the things that he said. Basically, is he looking to, or are you put in a position where you're trying to get rid of people early on in order to better your chances?
I think that for me, like knowing what I can do, my capabilities, I try to be either in the split. I always try to, like, for me to win a race, it has to be from a reduced field because I have zero sprint and like zero ambition to be in a field sprint.
But that field size reduction comes as a product of how strong you are and how strong the guys who make who whittle the field down.
Yeah. I've had so many times where like you'll be in that front group that's trying to get away and then it'll keep coming back together. And then it's like, oftentimes if you just roll off the front of that, like after it slows down and just keep pedaling, I've had that
snap the elastic
so many times that it's established a breakaway.
Yeah.
Like if you just do that one last push.
Yeah. You've done that to me in plenty of criteriums.
To all of us.
I think like, man, I'm really animating this race, and Dave's just rolling away
Dave's
from
just
it.
playing with you. Oh, he's tired now.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the thought in your mind is like, I can't do like. No matter how strong you are, I think you have self-doubt.
And that's another thing that who's our question?
This one is from, this is from Ellis. Yeah.
So Ellis, there's never really that one guy who's that much stronger than everybody else. I mean, there are probably a handful of riders who are equally capable. And it's not up to one person to dictate the way that race is going to unfold. I mean, I've seen incredibly strong domestic professional riders with nearly a full lap gap on a pretty, maybe like a kilometer-long circuit, and you think, oh, it's over. There's only 20 minutes of racing left. It's over. Yeah. And then the guys behind organize, and they bring it back in 10 minutes. Yeah. So there's never one person who's going to dictate how this race is going to unfold.
No, like when you get to the higher level, there's nobody that's
that's
strong.
what I'm talking about. Yeah. At the lower levels, when you're maybe blowing through the the Cat 5, Cat 4, and you're that guy with that huge engine,
you have somebody exceptional like a Rossi who just flies through. I'm going to race bikes, and then he's going to just win every bike race.
Yeah,
turns out I'm real good at it.
Yeah, exactly. This is from David from Facebook, and a slightly unrelated question. He says, "Do y'all ever feel sluggish after a complete rest day?" And then he asked, do most people just sit on the couch during these rest days or try to get out on the bike for a little bit at least? I found that I'm more likely to be sluggish after a complete day on the couch for some reason. And this one actually does tie into like stage racing because I know I haven't done a stage race long enough to warrant a rest day. I've only done 6 days is the longest. So, but I know you have. What do you do with those critical rest days?
So the longest stage race that I've ever done was 12 days, and we got one rest day.
Wow.
And
That's
you
long.
definitely go ride. I mean, you go ride for a couple hours.
It carries to training, too. I mean, when you do a hard block of training and then you take a complete day off the bike, you can bet that next day back on the bike is not going to be your best performance. Yeah. So, and it's for that very reason that I like people to try to ease back into their training. And and why it's sometimes you just, if you're assessing FTP for instance, and you come back on a Tuesday after taking Monday off, maybe get on the bike on Monday and do a half-hour easy spin, or maybe even a couple short efforts, depending on just how tired you are, in anticipation of performing better on Tuesday, or postpone the assessment to Wednesday, or the harder workout to Wednesday with an easier ride in your legs coming into it, because there is that sluggishness. It's so very common.
Oh yeah, like we've mentioned this before, but like I always find that I perform most poorly after a rest day, and then I perform better, and this is a personal thing, and it totally changes with age, but changes from person to person too. But I usually perform better with 1 to 2 days of pretty decently hard effort into the legs, and then that third day I really feel like I'm firing pretty well.
A lot of riders are in that boat. I mean, I would guess that maybe when you do 2 and 3 day races, first day isn't quite as good as the second or third day. And I know race weekends are the same way. The Saturday race seems to have a great influence on how well I do on Sunday.
Yeah, it really does.
Since Dominican Republic's fresh on our minds, and we talked about it at our other podcast at Team Camp, like after this race, I was tired. Like at the final stage, I was tired, and I was glad to be done and not
1600
crash.
TSS will do that in
But
6 days.
I actually felt like I'm like, bring it, like, let's do another stage. Like I could have ridden another stage, but then the next day we didn't do anything. We just packed our bikes immediately after the stage, and like those next couple days, I'm like, am I getting sick? I felt terrible.
There is some research that backs up the idea that basically the endorphins they rolling, and each day there's an uptick, and that rest day allows them to drop back down, so that when you jump back in, you kind of have to rebuild them. Whereas what you're describing is you come off of a series of days where you're just burying yourself, but that next day, even though you should be tired, and muscularly and maybe centrally you are actually tired, but for whatever reason the painkillers are still flowing, and you can still go out there and do some work.
Yeah, and like I definitely do notice like that getting stronger throughout a race. So like I think my best ride in Dominican came on day 3, and it was insane. It was like a magic day on the bike, right? It's just
Chainless.
Just didn't feel the chain. Boardman and Quentin and I all made the front group of 15, and I think we did 125 Ks in the breakaway.
Wow.
Or maybe 110.
That's
something
a long
like that.
day.
70,
And it was like 4
miles.
hours of just
Hard.
as hard as you could go, pace line, and we put 7 minutes into the field or something like
Holy
that. 6
cow.
minutes.
And that was 3 days in.
3 days in.
Yeah.
And that was probably my best day on the bike of that whole race.
Yeah, I found that a lot. So it's kind of to be expected. Like just know that coming in, and everybody will react slightly differently to rest days. So you just have to know how you react and how you're currently reacting, because that can change too.
Yeah, no, I've coached riders who need that full rest day, and they come back and they are ready to get after it after a full rest day. And then other riders who need to sharpen, other riders who need to do a pretty substantial workout the day before a race weekend.
Yeah,
it's definitely subjective.
Yeah, so play around with that. Another question. This one's from YouTube, from the Comeback Kid. He says, "As someone coming from time trialing, how do you recommend getting into road racing? Or do you have any tips you wish you had starting out?" So it's pretty rare in the States that you see somebody just getting into time trialing here, but it's really common over in the UK to see people just do time trialing.
Those 10-milers. And
all the stuff they
Tons
do
of
over
time
there. So if you're coming from time trial efforts and then going over to road racing, what tips would you give people? Because they probably have a pretty good amount of sustainable power.
They got good fitness.
Yep,
but probably no experience with riding in groups.
Yeah,
is my guess. Unless they, maybe do a bit of that in training.
Yeah. I think I would just search out the fast group rides around your area, do those, see how it works. I mean, the road racing is like, that's why the strong guys sometimes don't do super well, because it's so like, there's a huge learning curve.
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to put yourself in all these different situations, and you see how it works.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so fluid. Every bike race is so fluid. Like I said, like your plan A goes out the window, plan B goes out the window.
Yep.
It's just it's you have to just see it.
Yeah.
Watch bike races on TV and
ride responsively. Learn how to anticipate. Learn just how to maneuver. How forcefully you have to react to some things and how almost complacently you can react to others.
Yeah.
There's a lot of learning the rhythm of group dynamics.
I would say go in with like specific objectives that you can control to those group rides. So for example, like you're new, let's just assume you're new to race environments with groups. One day, just tell yourself to try to, like we've talked about, maybe try to stick in the first third. Or the next day, just make it a goal to start a breakaway and stick as long as you can, right? Or maybe another day, make it your goal to chase down X number of breaks. Like whatever it might be, like if you go in with those little goals that you can control rather than, because I see a lot of people just go, like at our local Hammerfest that we have the drop ride on Saturdays, people will show up, they get dropped and they're like, I hated it, I got dropped. But if you come in with a different goal, then because maybe you're just going to get dropped because you're not familiar yet or you're not strong enough. But if you come in with a specific goal that you can actually make sure happens, then job done and it's been successful. And that way you can learn week after week in different ways.
And don't necessarily be the rider who, because you're a strong time trialist or maybe you've got a triathlon background who thinks, my strengths are what they are. So I'm just going to try to roll off the field. If that doesn't work, then that's my strategy and that's it. Be the guy, the girl, the rider who learns. Get in there and accept that I'm not going to be great at this right away, but I'm going to try to figure this out. I've got I've got a big engine. I've got a great potential, but there's so much I need to learn about this. I'm going to go in and figure some stuff out and expect to not necessarily fail, but not excel for a little while.
Yeah. It's pretty normal.
I think that's cycling is so mental too. Like you could have great fitness. And I honestly think like I'm a pretty decent rider, but I think that what one of my strengths is like I'm pretty tenacious, right? Like and that just comes from seeing
experience.
Things. And it even can go to just knowing the game, right?
Yeah.
You just, and I don't want to sound like braggadocious or anything,
No.
Like I don't win very much. I'll tell you that right now. If you get into this sport to win, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, that's a true story.
But was that going somewhere? I thought you were going to brag for us.
It's all worth it when you know.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is, right? You got to learn. Got to get out there.
Next question from Sean. He says, how much time do the Marc Pro guys spend riding with each other outside of team camp? Do you all mostly just do your own thing and just show up for races and go?
So team camp is probably the only time that I ride with a lot of the guys because I live in Reno and most of the guys are in Northern California.
Some in Southern California.
Yeah, Sam Boardman and Nate Freed and I guess Blake's pretty far south, but I guess he's in Slow.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why we do those team camps is just there's new faces, but it's also like a time to catch up, right? Like I haven't seen those guys in 4 months. Right?
You do multiple camps a year. The team does. So
we do 2 team camps. I think the younger guys on the team probably see each other more.
Yeah,
because they're of the same age and they, they might go and do stuff together.
Yeah. But do you feel that hinders you at all compared to like a team that might like live in the same area and just because the pro teams are very similar to how you guys do it in the sense.
But I don't even know that up at the pro tour level you have a lot of opportunities for the team to ride as a team.
Yeah, they
most
don't
of the time
ride
your
together
training
very
is done on your own, maybe with a training partner or two.
Yeah. I think it was different when Rossi was still racing road. I would go ride with him, and Ben Reagans is on the team. I ride with Ben a lot.
But it's a small handful, if maybe just another rider.
That being said, though, I think like this, especially this year, this is my 3rd year on the team, and I feel like we have such a good group of guys like that are all like you have to have an ego to a certain point to do this sport, but like these guys all keep it in check, and it's I think we're all really friendly and we get along well. So it's like you haven't seen that person for 4 months, and then you roll in and you're like, oh, great to see you. Let's go ride.
Yeah.
And it's another reason why I like doing the travel races overseas is you get to see your teammates who you haven't seen in a few months or a couple weeks or,
really get to understand who they are and how they ride and everything else.
I mean, you're in that, like the stage races, you get to know people.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
You're in a bubble. You know people's breaking point. And you know that so-and-so leaves their underwear on the floor.
And perhaps the last question, we'll see if you have any others, throw them in. We didn't get to all of them, but this is a good one, and I feel like it would provide for possibly a good ending note. This one's from Junio. He says, with such a big interest in the USA regarding cycling, why don't we see more Americans in the peloton or American-dominated teams in Europe? And he has a sad face after that. That's a good question because, so, I mean, the Northern California region that you race in very regularly, Dave, is one of the most competitive ones in the nation. And we see like Nielsen Paulus and they're like fast riders, like, you know, plenty of fast riders that have come from that region, or young Americans, I should say, that are coming from that region right now. But why do you think you race with these young kids that are moving up all the time? But why do you think we don't see so many of them at the top level racing, you know, on
video
TV?
Games?
But the American guys, like, why aren't they as successful? What do you guys think?
So I don't want to take a dark note, but I think that the Armstrong stuff kind of maybe discouraged people from getting into it. And maybe we're like in a little dearth of like new talent, but even like on a bright side, we do have some very promising riders, even in my team. Yeah. I know there's a couple guys on Marc Pro that are they're gonna go to that next level for sure. I think we've like we're running out of like years for Van Garderen, you know. He's like he's been our hope for a while, but we do have, you know, Nielsen Paulus and Sepkus and those guys that have taken that step up.
Some true
talent. So I definitely think that the Armstrong thing, kind of funding for teams and stuff like that, just
kind of knocked the wind out of the sails.
Yeah. I mean, I can only speculate, but I would attribute it to, it just appears to me that the European culture is more cycling immersive. Just like a baseball player over here can be, I mean, that's their life. They're going to spend their entire their lifestyle shaped around it. And I think that carries to cycling, you know, across the pond, not as much over here. I think that our high-level riders, that's not the only thing that's not the one thing around which their lives revolve.
I feel like we have like kind of a disconnect, like with our feeder systems being a bit weak and everything else.
We have feeder systems. I mean, we have a couple Devo teams, and
there's the talent development camps, I believe, that USAC has, but it's and it's good, and it's helping like a lot of riders, and it's helping them out. I think that we just need some time to build a base.
I don't think our infrastructure even touches what they've got going in Europe.
I think when you look at, I mean, I just saw a video of like on Facebook of like 10-year-olds in Italy. Riding bikes. All, you know,
their pipeline starts when these kids are barely out of diapers.
It's pretty crazy.
And then just like us going down to LA for aero testing, that track is like the only Olympic level track anywhere
in the U.S. I was kind of shocked to know that was the only one.
I was surprised. When
you think about like kids in Belgium or in
France,
the Netherlands, they're probably doing velodrome racing when they're super young. And I think our culture, although we have great endurance athletes here, in triathlon and road cycling and in running, I think if you look at what Europe is like, we pushed kids towards baseball and football, like sports you can do when you're fat.
True. Yeah, totally true.
I mean,
it's different.
And not to take anything away from those sports, but like that's our culture, right?
If there was a kid that was a road racer going to school when I was young in our school, which there was not, he would have been weird. Like you know.
We've probably got the same amount of talent over here as they have in Europe. We just don't suss it out, flesh it out as well as they do. We don't have the pipeline, the support, the infrastructure that they have over there.
I think a good example would be Australia. Look at how many top level cyclists come out of Australia. That's crazy. 7 million people in that country, and we have 325 million in the U.S. So we obviously, like, if you just crunch the numbers, the talent is here. But Australia is just doing it the right way, right? They're developing it and finding it and doing the right thing. But it'll change. It'll change.
Absolutely. I think so too. Well, I guess that covers it. We'll close with one last thing. This is from Alex from Facebook. He says, what's your number one tip for recovery on stage races? And I assume that he's talking like day-to-day recovery.
It's going to sound like a sponsor plug, but recovery drink from H24 and the Marc Pro.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does work. And like you've said before, maybe that's just putting your feet up.
Yeah. But it's hard to know. But
stretch, just that ritual. Like, I feel like training's a ritual, right?
Mm-hmm.
But recovery is a ritual too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whatever, if you make that a point to do that every day after a race or a hard training session, like if you take down your recovery drink, stretch, Marc Pro, whatever it is, roll out, you do those consistently. Like Chad always says, this is about consistency, right? Like if you can consistently do those things in your training and your recovery, it's going to be a benefit.
Yeah, and with that high level of consistency, small tweaks are noticeable. You change something subtle, but you've been consistent with everything else. It's a little easier to pin any effects on that one little change.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thanks, Dave. This has been good, man.
Yeah, hopefully I wasn't too boring.
No, it's awesome. I feel like we got into some stuff that we actually don't really cover a whole lot because we don't talk a whole lot about stage races because we don't do as many of them. So we're really glad that you were able to do that.
Yeah, good stuff, Dave.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my team. And
where can people find more info on the team?
We have a Facebook page, Marc Pro Cycling. Our biggest following's on Instagram, which I think that we probably post on there more. So if you really want to follow the team, go to Instagram, our website, Marc Pro Cycling.
Yeah. Follow the riders too. You'll find them through following the team. You'll find the riders, and they're like you mentioned in the last podcast, super approachable, good dudes. So when you see these guys at a road race, go say hi to them.
Yeah. Follow all of us. Our team manager, he posts a lot. He's got a cool company called Michelangelo too. You can follow him there.
Yeah.
Makes funny little stem caps.
He does. It's true. Yeah.
So, we're big on social media.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. And thanks for joining us. And remember, you can submit your questions. We'll be back to a typical episode, a normal Ask a Cycling Coach podcast episode, because Nate will be back in town next week, back from Hawaii. We'll see if he got faster training at sea level.
I kind of feel like I'm sitting in the King's Throne.
The King's Throne.
Trying on the crown.
Yeah. You did well with it. So we'll be back with a normal episode. So that means send in the questions that you have, whatever they are, cycling, triathlon, training, whatever within that realm, send them in. You can do that at trainerroad.com/podcast. And we'll talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.